Hey, what's going on guys? Today I just want to showcase a cool motivity or strength based build using the Mjolnir, which is a very powerful weapon of which does a lot of electric shock buildup, which that status effect is definitely insane because it just makes enemies take way more damage and actually has them be stagger a lot quicker. Now it's actually extremely good against puppets in particular, but this weapon itself normally actually comes with a longer handle, the Mjolnir, so we're going to pair it alongside a shorter handle for two reasons. One, because Thor cosplay, why not? So it's going to be more of a cosplay type of build, but the build itself is still going to be really good. And it actually makes it have a quicker moveset as well, which quicker movesets are just always nicer to have, especially with those charged heavy attacks, because half of the game is just spamming charged heavy attacks to just stagger better or just end up getting the stance break. So it's extremely beneficial to have in that regard. Now, unfortunately, you do get the Mjolnir a lot later in the game. Pretty sure it's like at the start of Area 9. So if you did want to know certain types of weapons or ways you could use as alternatives or just to use until you end up getting this weapon, I'll probably cover that in just a bit. But as for our handle, we're going to be going with the Krat Police Baton handle. Now this handle is actually extremely good because it's going to be one of your few handles that actually have a quicker moveset and actually have a very good motivity scaling. If you put this with a motivity crank when you alter the handle, it would end up putting it into the A scaling for the motivity. And the moveset itself is still really good, has a very solid and quick light attacks, very nice running heavy attack as well. And the heavy attack or fully charged is very quick, which is obviously extremely beneficial when trying to stance break enemies. And with this thing itself, it actually just gets very good stance damage or stagger damage in itself. As you can see, it just instantly like just staggered that one puppet with one charged heavy attack. Even with using this head with other types of handles that are quicker, it still won't actually do that same amount of stagger damage. But probably the best part about this handle is that its Fable art actually does boost your next attack by about 75% more damage roughly from my testing at least. And it's going to be really nice because you can pair it alongside the cool Fable art of the Mjolnir itself. And as you can see, it does 4.5k damage, which is absolutely absurd. Now, unfortunately, this means that you do have to spec into an extra Fable charge. So you can actually have 4 in total because you'd obviously need 1 for the weapon art of the handle and obviously you need the 3 for the head itself. Now, alongside with this, we're going to be pairing it with the Fulminous Legion Arm, which is a very solid motivity and an advanced-based Legion Arm that does a bunch of shock damage. Now, it actually will scale a lot better with that advance in terms of its damage, but we're just going to be using it just to proc the shock itself, which is still going to do it very well, because as you can see, when you just use it a few times, it will just end up proccing shock very quickly, which is nice. And then obviously, when they do proc shock, you can use both of these weapon art skills and end up doing, as you can see, about 5.8k damage, which is just even more ridiculous. Now, as for the stats for this build, basically, it's just going into vitality and motivity. You do want to have a little bit of points into your vigor and capacity as well. If you're like going through your first playthrough, probably have about 10 to 15 of both of these things. Your stamina is very important, but there are certain types of P organ upgrades that you can to just help your stamina recovery and your stamina consumption anyway. But yes, definitely just go into your vitality and motivity because that's just going to be your health and damage. Now, one thing you may have noticed is that I actually am slightly heavy with this build. Now, the difference between a slightly heavy equipment load and a normal equipment load isn't actually that much of a difference. You just run a slight bit slower and your stamina recovery speed is a little bit slower as well, which is noticeable, but it's not that big of a deal. Honestly, I just rather have just more defenses, be able to tank more attacks and actually just stay below 80%. But as for your amulets though, your first one is definitely going to have to be one of these 3. The more damage to carcasses, more damage to humans or puppets. Obviously, depending on what area you're in, is actually going to be dependent on which one of these you have equipped, because it is going to be roughly about just 10% more damage to those particular type of enemies. As for my second slot, I just have more Ogre acquisition when killing enemies, and my third one is going to be for more physical damage reduction rate. Now, you can go like a few different ways here. You can actually go with the increased max to HP, stamina, and legion. You can actually have more stamina recovery speed, which obviously is going to be really nice if you're going to go slightly heavy loaded, because you're going to have that lower recovery speed in terms of your stamina. You could go with HP regen as well. It is going to be like 1 HP per second, so it's going to be a lot better earlier in the game. The life ring is still really good in terms of having more health. You could actually go with more equipment load as well, if you felt the need to actually have that, if you just wanted more defenses. But speaking of defenses, honestly, just go with all the best stuff that's going to help you stay below 80% equipment load as well. Now, obviously, do keep in mind with what particular area you're going into. There will be certain types of enemies that are going to do certain types of damages, so just definitely be mindful of that when actually picking a certain type of one. Now, as for your special grindstone, it's just going to be Electric Blitz because you just want to have more sources that have the electric shock type damage so you can just proc that status effect more consistently. Now, if you're going to go up against enemies that are weaker to fire, like the carcass type enemies, then use the flame grindstone. If you're going up against humans, then use the acid grindstone because that is weaker to that. As for the rest of these, honestly, they're just not that great. I'd just rather have these ones because it just means more damage and you're doing a status effect as well. There are other weapon alternatives you can use until you actually do acquire the Mjolnir. You could actually go with the big pipe wrench head, which honestly will just work very much the same in terms of its damage and actually has a very similar skill as well. You could also use the exploding pickaxe head, which is going to be pretty much the exact same thing as the Mjolnir, except this one actually does that fire status effect instead of the shock based one. Now, if you didn't really care to have this because it has very poor range, you definitely could actually go use the 7 coil spring sword or the holy sword arc, which both of these are going to be boss based weapons that you can get pretty early on. This one is actually acquired off the first boss, and this one I'm pretty sure is off the third major boss. Now, I actually do like this one a little bit better because it has the better light attack combo, because when you transform it, it actually extends the weapon to have even more range, and it is a very solid combo, and those charging heavy attacks are actually pretty quick as well, which is nice, and does have that very cool, nice of Fable art for its main blade. Now, as for your P organ, honestly, I'm not going to cover everything here because not everything is important towards the build specifically, but the most important stuff is definitely going to be your pulse cells. Just go spec into these ones like the most important things. You definitely want to get rising dodge as well, because there's plenty of times you get knocked to the ground and you won't be able to like move around because it takes forever to stand up. So having rising dodge is very important, and you definitely want to have an extra Fable slot, because obviously with our skill of the Fable arts of the handle and the head itself, it's going to require 4, so it's going to need that 4th one. As for the other stats or specs of what you get alongside the P organ, as for attack, you basically want to have all this stuff, just more charge attack stagger, because we're just going to be spamming charge attacks for days, because we do have a pretty quick charge attack and it actually does some decent stagger damage. More Fable attack and fatal attack damage as well, and increasing the stagger duration is also very handy. And we actually do want to spam a bunch of deflections. You actually want a perfect guard throughout almost every single enemy in the game. It's actually very handy to use for every single boss fight, so I would definitely recommend just getting used to just deflecting and getting that perfect guard. Now, you could also go with the increased effect to your Fable art effect duration, because after you use the skill of the Mjolnir head, it actually does boost your weapon with more of that electric shock damage for about 15 seconds, so just having this could actually improve it by a little bit more, so that actually could be pretty handy. As for the survival type, honestly, you just want to go with everything that boosts your pulse cells. So anything that is enhances the recovery or adds another pulse cell, you want to go into that. Now, as for your ability type, you definitely want to have a lower charge attack stamina consumption, because just having lower stamina consumption for your charge heavy attack is just going to result in not having to level up as much vigor, so you can put points into vitality and motivity instead, because we're going to be spamming a bunch of charged heavy attacks. You definitely want to have perfect guard Fable charge enhance, because ideally you are going to get a bunch of perfect guards, and that's just going to involve me getting more charged Fable, which is going to be spamming our skills over and over again, and just having less stamina consumed for dashing as well is actually going to be pretty handy. Just less stamina consumption is always really good. Now, as for your item types, these are just not going to be as important. I just went into just getting more Ergo basically, so I can just level up even more. I guess the only other important one that might actually be your special grindstone increase effect duration. That one actually might be pretty cool. Okay, just showcasing exactly how I do like to use this build, even though it's pretty self-explanatory. But against trash mobs, anything works fine. I like to use running heavy attacks. Please don't do that. Nice deflect. But obviously the major downside to this weapon is that it has very short range. But what definitely does work is that you can just use a couple of shock attacks against these larger guys. And then once they end up getting staggered, then you can just finish off with this as well. And honestly, you can just do whatever with this build. It's perfectly fine. But constantly keep using your charged heavy attacks. And once you end up doing good in the shock, then definitely use your weapon skill. Keep deflecting, you end up getting a bunch of Fable back as well. And pretty much that's exactly how it does work, but keep staying on your enemy and being aggressive, because it is a shorter range weapon, so it is going to end up resulting in that type of playstyle. Anyway, that pretty much is it for the video. As always, the rest of the video is going to be some more gameplay. Please do like and subscribe, because I will have some more Lies of P videos coming along the way. I do want to actually talk about the boss weapons and boss amulets as well. And I am actually live every single day on Twitch, so do follow me there. I'll be playing a lot more of this game. Anyway, see you next one, guys. Bye.
extra points for fighting fair. Survive and win. That's it.